Hey guys, it's Mitch. How's it going? We're taking a look at the next miniseries of Age of Apocalypse with what I think turned out to be one of the most popular miniseries of this particular crossover. We're looking at Generation Next today. So the Age of Apocalypse crossover itself, of course, was a crossover between the X-Men books in 1995, set in a world where Charles Xavier was killed during, I want to say the 60s, accelerating Apocalypse's timeline for when to make his appearance, and resulting in Apocalypse taking over North America. He's killed off a bunch of the normal humans and either killed off or driven out any mutants who didn't flock to his banner. There is, of course, a rebel movement led by Magneto, since Xavier was too dead to put the X-Men together. And the new various X teams theoretically worked in concert to try to destabilize Apocalypse somehow. I took a look at all the Astonishing X-Men comics before this. It didn't have a whole lot to do with Apocalypse. It was more about that particular group of X-Men taking on Holocaust, which is the son of Apocalypse. So perhaps this series will be the series that has an X-team actually dealing with the Apocalypse problem. This is going to be Generation Next, which is based off of Generation X, which was a brand new team that was put together just a couple of months before the Age of Apocalypse crossover started. We went over issue 1 already, which wasn't a bad issue at all, really. Particularly considering, I'm not a Scott Lobdell fan, but I thought he did an alright job with that one, even if not a whole lot happened in it. That was the book that was essentially an update on New Mutants, kind of bringing a new mutant teen group into the fold. One that was made for the 90s, where everybody has weird body horror shit going on. And then, that series managed to get 3 or 4 or 5 issues in before it got quickly shoved aside so that the new crossover could take over for 5 months. It's a weird move, particularly considering how much marketing and preparation went into Generation X beforehand. You think you want to give it a little bit of runway before derailing things and changing the continuity, at least let us get familiar with the characters. But no, they didn't do that at all. We noted in that video, it didn't hurt sales any. Generation X was a top seller for years. I think in large part based on Chris Bachalo's art. He wasn't able to do too many issues in total, but I think he did enough that it kind of stuck in people's minds, as this was the one that had the great art on it. And we're going to see a whole lot more of that great art in this mini-series here. So we're getting into Generation Next here, starting with issue 1. So this is the group that, nobody really knows at this point. Nobody's had enough time to kind of acclimate to the team, learn who any of the characters are. Not really. You got a few basic ideas on who the characters are, but it's not like they've had time to cement any kind of relationships with each other or set up any kind of ongoing storyline that you can maybe somehow transmute into the Age of Apocalypse timeline. So we are kind of starting fresh on this. We might as well just get started. We'll start with the cover here. This is kind of spectacular, really. This is basically Chris Bachalo drawing Joe Madureira characters. And it seems that when Chris Bachalo is drawing these stereotypical 90s superhero characters, he's kind of committing to a 90s superhero style. So, we get Colossus with the massive over-muscled frame. We get his gritted teeth. We have Skin here at the bottom who's grinning like a third of all Image characters would. What I'm pretty sure in the Generation X comic, the best way you could describe Skin was dour. We're going to get Shadowcat in this as well, who appears to have some kind of Wolverine claws, although they're set up on some kind of, bracelet system. We're not going to get an explanation for why she has those, although there were several one-shot issues that went out before the Age of Apocalypse event launched. It might have been mentioned in one of those. I wouldn't be surprised. And we've got Paige Guthrie, a.k.a. Husk. We've got Chamber. We do have Magneto here, although he's not going to show up a whole lot in this series. And we've also got Mondo. And this is kind of the first real appearance of Mondo, which is kind of interesting because Mondo was a character that was heavily advertised with the rest of the team leading up to the release of issue 1 of Generation X. And then for some reason, he didn't show up in those first few issues before the Age of Apocalypse events started. I saw it suggested that that was down to Scott Lobdell thinking that maybe he had a few too many characters to juggle at the beginning, so they decided to kind of leave one out and bring him in later. And that turned out to be Mondo. So strange move to decide to include him in this event, really. Except that, for one thing, I think the editorial office was kind of bombarded with letters being like, yo, where's the big dude who was advertised in all the advanced marketing stuff? And also, there was a series of toys for Generation X that were about to hit the shelves, and Mondo was one of those toys. So the X office kind of had to scramble to get Mondo into something to justify him having a toy presence. So they just kind of shoved him in here and went, I guess this is his first appearance. There's going to be a few first appearances in this. This character here, Vincente, he's also going to have his first appearance in this series. I still don't really know who this is. That's okay. But yeah, no, great looking cover anyway. Very nice line work. This is going to be Chris Bachalo and Mark Buckingham doing the art duties. And this is maybe some of their best work, this particular miniseries. At least, definitely their best superhero work, I think. I still like their work together on Death, the High Cost of Living quite a bit. It's a very nice looking book. And they would continue to work together for years after this, I believe. But, not too long after this, Chris Bachalo started adopting a much cartoonier style that really ended up leaning on a lot of, just kind of filling up blank space with all sorts of morbidly little details. And I think that kind of divided the Chris Bachalo fans. I'm not as big on that later style myself. I'm okay with it. It's not my favorite by any means. I think this might be the best looking Chris Bachalo stuff I've seen in this series. Which is odd, because you'd think his best work would get saved for Generation X #1. But that feels like it got a little bit rushed, and the overall impression I got when I was walking away from it was that it was kind of underwhelming. I didn't get any of that in this series. Which could be down to a few things. I know Chris Bachalo had a whole lot of lead time to get the drawing done on the first few issues. And, the Age of Apocalypse crossover was going to be kind of a prestige event that was going to be a showcase. So it could be that, during that lead time, he just kind of devoted a little bit of extra to this particular project. The story itself, we're going to start off with Chamber here. Chamber is essentially in a danger room scenario. It's a little strange seeing Chamber with a face. He's the guy whose lower jaw and chest cavity are constantly exploding. But in this continuity, it seems like just his chest is constantly exploding, which is an improvement, I guess. And we get a fun action pose here out of Chris Bachalo, which, I sometimes forget that Chris Bachalo can just draw straight up superhero stuff. Before this, he'd definitely done it before. He did it on, I guess, Ghost Rider 2099, and he also did it on X-Men Unlimited. Not a whole lot, though. But this looks very nice. Very nice use of blacks. Great dynamic shot. Get the coat flying out behind him here. Get some speed lines. Get all the debris and the explosions. Good looking stuff. And it's going to continue. So eventually we're going to find out that Chamber is fighting against Husk in this opening sequence. Eventually. They do kind of take their time getting there. And yeah, so in the meantime, he's just going to kind of get flipping around. Explosions going off around him. I guess there's a flail coming at him, which he explodes. This is how he releases his energy now, is he releases psionic energy through this chest prosthesis. And the dialogue kind of just keeps spinning its wheels, waiting for things to happen. I know there's some people who don't like me ragging too much on Scott Lobdell's writing. It's just that there's opportunities to actually, tell the audience things here, which we're not really going to take advantage of. Not very much. Most of the information we're going to get out of this is that this is Jono. He's sometimes called Chamber. He has psionic energy, and he lives in a world where Apocalypse is taking over. It's just we get there in the most roundabout way, and I think a big part of it is that Scott Lobdell's dialogue style really bugs me sometimes. The way he just kind of tends to have his characters ramble. So, here he's talking about being a mutant, and we get, on one of my better days, today, for instance, I might admit, there's an upside to me genetic heritage, such as it is. I can sum it up in one word. Power. Psionic power. Okay, 2 words. Nobody can ever finish a sentence. That just kind of grates on me a little bit. Anyway, we don't get too much of that in this series. I think it's just the fact that it's front-loaded that kind of got me on edge immediately. So, credits on this, created by Chris Bachalo and Scott Lobdell. Inker Mark Buckingham. Colors Steve Buccellato and Electric Crayon. The colors in this are quite nice, I gotta say, for 1995. This is still early days of digital separation, and it feels like this book is a bit of a step ahead of some other books at this time. This is still a couple of years before Liquid would take over and turn everything in comics into lens flares and metal reflections. I think in this comic they reach a very nice balance. And we can see how great the mix with Chris Bachalo and Mark Buckingham is. There's a lot of attention to detail going on. There's a lot of very nice line weights in this. Good separation of figures from the background, which is important in this particular story because Chris Bachalo seems to be going pretty hard on the details. So if you don't separate your figures, then you might have a tendency to lose your figures in the background a little bit. And it's interesting, they're actually almost getting like an Art Adams look to some of these pieces. That might largely be down to Chambers' expression here. Jono gets a moment where he's not being attacked and he gets distracted by some kind of video system coming up. So this is Know-It-All, which is the, I think, computer that Generation Next uses, like an AI kind of thing, essentially. And as he's distracted, he gets yanked off his feet and slammed on his back. And, again, like we're going with kind of a standard superhero look, just with the fidelity turned way up. So he got jumped by Husk, although that is not made clear right off the bat here, as all we see is some girl's ass as she's laying on top of him. So I guess Husk and Chamber are a thing in this continuity. It's a little weird trying to parse the different personalities, because they are very different. Like in Generation X, Husk was, corn-fed country girl who had designs on being leader of the team and seemed to be kind of a straight-A student kind of girl. Here she's just kind of a brat who gets a little bit too lovey-dovey with some of her teammates, mostly Chamber, but not always Chamber. So while she's smooching on Chamber, he flips her off him, and they're going to have a little bit of banter back and forth, which isn't bad, actually. I don't mind the dynamic they've got too much. They do have to go out of their way to tell us that this is Paige Guthrie, because she doesn't look anything like she does in the main series. And, they're kind of rebuking each other a little bit for not taking this training session particularly seriously. But then it just kind of degenerates into smooching again, which introduces a third member to the training session, which is Mondo. And this is kind of the first real look we're seeing of Mondo, period. I think he did show up for like a page or two in Generation X before this, but it wasn't like a proper introduction just yet. And Mondo's deal is he can absorb the properties of anything he touches, very much like Grunge of Gen 13. It's a little bit odd. It does seem an awful lot. Like, for one thing, I think there was a little bit of enmity between Wildstorm and Marvel at this time, because Wildstorm was about to put out a comic called Gen X, and then Marvel sued them because they already had the trademark on Generation X, and they were about to release a new comic that they'd been producing for a while at that point. So Wildstorm had to change Gen X to Gen 13, and it feels like there might have been a little bit of, like, getting their own back by finding out that on the Generation X team, there was going to be a big guy who, absorbed the properties of things, and like, okay, well, we'll do that first then. Anyway, Mondo doesn't really like the fact that these training sessions usually turn into makeout sessions. So he's going to scoop the pair of them up here and then start talking in the third person, because that's apparently how Mondo talks. Absolutely great looking pages, too. We get our nice big image here of Mondo busting up through the ground, busting all the panels out of the way as well. I like that. We got kind of an anchor image of the introduction of Husk here. That's nice, too. We're going to get the story of how the Age of Apocalypse crossover happened as filtered through Marvel marketing. And then more ad stuff. And okay, now we're back in the comic. And Chamber decides that the training session is still on, so he uses his psionic energy thing to blast Husk here. And then Husk, her power is that she can essentially pull off her skin and sort of replace her body, and change the properties and something like that. So she pulls off all the skin on her hand and she's got a knife under there. That's how that works. I mean, I'll take their word for it. And she holds that up to Mondo's neck, so I guess they're winning for the moment. And that is when Colossus is going to join the training session here. So Colossus and Shadowcat, they're going to act as the teachers for this particular group. You got your young teenage group, you have to have your babysitters. And Colossus in this very much has a Joe Mad design, which Chris Bachalo is going to stick to. He does have a pretty cool look, and I gotta say, Chris Bachalo is pulling off the mid-90s extreme type style very well, like better than, I would say, most people at this time, almost anybody. It's easy to say that because by 95, Jim Lee's not usually drawing comics. Todd's not drawing comics. Mark Silvestri doesn't usually draw comics. Liefeld maybe once or twice a year. So, the top dogs are kind of just sitting the race out. But no, Chris Bachalo, when he wants to go in this direction, he absolutely can pull it off, which is kind of great to see. So Colossus acting as teacher, he's going to be a very hard-nosed kind of teacher, which is not exactly what you expect from Colossus. You expect him to be compassionate, maybe like stoic compassionate and maybe kind of practical, but not like out and out, drill sergeant, which is what he's going to be in this. And that's kind of the point, we've got an Elseworlds type situation in this particular crossover. Not just the costumes are going to change, personalities are going to change as well. So the whole point is to just kind of Subvert your expectations. You know, you might have heard that before, but it wasn't as belabored a phrase back then. So Colossus is going to approach Chamber first, and he's like, why is everybody still alive? You should have killed them all. Chamber says something along the lines of, I don't feel like killing them all. So Colossus is going to rear back and punch his face off by the looks of it. Except then Husk jumps on his back and again transmutes into something acidy. Again, absolutely fantastic looking pages. At a time when it's getting kind of hard to find that over-rendered hyper-dynamic kind of style. It's really nice to see it kind of fully realized here. And while she's gooping Colossus up, something busts up out of his back, and that's Shadowcat. So she's been just kind of phased and sitting inside of Colossus, which it seems like she does an awful lot of. I can't imagine the view's too great from there, but, you know, to each their own. And she, swats Husk off of Colossus and then comes at her with her Wolverine claws. That, again, we didn't really get an explanation for. And then starts slashing her up with a little smile on her face. Because this is a different Shadowcat as well. You know, there's no real empathy in this version of Shadowcat. She's very much like the White Queen. Where, yeah, you know, their mission is ultimately kind of altruistic. But if we gotta break a few eggs to get there, then so be it. And Husk runs away all slashed up, just completely slashed up. And pulls off some of her skin. Again, she's making another, arm spike, which tries to stab Shadowcat with, but Shadowcat, of course, phases at the last minute. And then boots Paige in the face. Nice looking pages. I will say, they really do kind of have to tell you that this is Shadowcat, because it doesn't look anything like Shadowcat and doesn't act anything like Shadowcat. It's really just kind of the fact that she's hanging out with Colossus, that it's like, oh, well, yeah, okay, maybe, I guess. I'll take your word for it. And while Shadowcat is engaged with Husk, Colossus gets a little distracted, giving Chamber a second, to charge up his chest explodey. And I think this is him blasting Colossus off him. I'm pretty sure. It's not super clear. There's an explosion of some kind, and we don't get a whole lot of help from the internal monologue that we're getting from Chamber here. Oh well. Looks up to see what's going on with Husk, and it looks like Shadowcat has Husk down on her face. She's got her mounted, and it looks like she's just going to flat out kill her at this point, and then she gets scooped up by Skin here. Again, all these pages, though, they look pretty great. Some of the storytelling is a little bit unclear sometimes, but it's the kind of thing, again, that should be easily clarified by the writer. It's just Scott Lobdell isn't always doing that. So yeah, Skin's hanging out up in the trees. Shadowcat yanks him down. We're way into the book here. We're past the halfway point. We're still doing this training session. And then something happens. I'm not entirely sure. Skin is in between Shadowcat and Husk. And Husk transmutes into something that can theoretically hurt Shadowcat, but, you know, Skin's in the way, and she doesn't particularly care. And, I don't know, something happened there. Might have gotten Shadowcat, but we're not going to see Shadowcat for the rest of this, so maybe not. And then the monitor clicks on, know-it-all says time, so that's the end of the session. But Colossus is all pissed off because maybe Shadowcat got hurt there. And I guess in this continuity, when Colossus gets pissed off, people get punched. But then he gets surrounded by another mutant named Vicente or Vincente. I think they kind of switch between the two. Who's another guy who can change the composition of his body. There's an awful lot of that on the Gen X guys. Husk does that. When she pulls off her skin, she can change the composition of her body underneath. Mondo can do that. Sync can do that by copying other people's powers. He's not going to be featured in this series, but he can do it as well. Emplate does the same thing. And yeah, now this Vicente guy as well. I wonder if any of this is down to body modification being a thing in 1995. That's just kind of starting to gain a groundswell in popularity. So it feels like physically changing yourself is becoming more popular. So maybe they're trying to focus on that a little bit. I'm not for sure. But yeah, this is going to be this character's first appearance, and they just kind of throw him in here like we know who this is. Oh, more ads. And then Magneto's going to show up, and he's going to call an end to this particular training session. Finally, now that we're 3 pages away from the end of the book, he goes and sees Colossus in his castle, and he's going to chew Colossus out for something. I don't know, he's yelling at them that they're not ready. And it's like, well, I don't know, they were exploding things just a minute ago. They seem pretty ready. Oh, I should point out, that castle looks absolutely fantastic. Great shadows, great detail, great angle, just everything about it, absolutely great. But Magneto's focus, of course, is on Bishop. Magneto's trying to see if there's any truth to Bishop's claim that the timeline is messed up, so that he can see if there's a way to fix it. That makes some sense. And we're finally going to start to get something resembling a forward-moving plot. Again, here at the end of the issue. So he says here he's got Nightcrawler and Gambit bringing him the resources he needs to verify Bishop's claim that his existence is a temporal aberration. So if they can confirm that, it's going to be up to Generation Next to find a mutant that can possibly travel back in time. Apparently that's very difficult in this particular timeline because time-traveling mutants are a particular kind of mutant that Apocalypse has targeted specifically and eliminated all of them that he could find. So he's had Know-It-All go through some possibilities for potential candidates, and they're going to rifle through a few. I don't know that any of them are characters from X-Men. Fox, don't know him. Non-designate, don't even name that one. I thought that was going to be Magic for a second there. It's not. Prelate Gallo, that one sounds a bit more familiar, but definitely not a larger character. And Gardner Monroe, designate Flashback, don't know him either. That's the one that seems the most like it might be a character. And then he saves the best for last because there is one more candidate that is still alive, and that is Colossus's sister, Illyana Rasputin, otherwise known as Magic, who he thought was dead because large parts of Russia got obliterated when Apocalypse made his entrance in the 70s. And Colossus believed that she got caught up in that. So now this is going to be the point of this whole miniseries, is trying to get to Illyana, who has been located in the slave pits in Portland. And that is going to do it for issue 1. So, not a whole lot happens there, but I don't know. I'm thinking about it. I'm wondering if it's justified because, again, this is not a team of mutants that anybody knows particularly well. They've only been around a few months, so spending the entire issue just kind of slowly bringing the cast in and having them bounce off each other for a little bit, that might be justifiable. I would still like to see more plot. Not getting any plot whatsoever until the last 3 pages of the book, I think is just not the way you set up a 4-issue series. I think you're just wasting valuable real estate there. But it might be justifiable. I don't know. It definitely helped a lot that the art was as good as it was. This is definitely the best art I've seen out of the Age of Apocalypse crossover by a mile so far. Way better than Astonishing X-Men. I thought Astonishing X-Men was going to be the high watermark for this crossover. This is quite a bit better. Anyway, on to issue 2 with another great cover. I'm pretty sure I saw this being shown in Wizard at some point or another, as Slash makes his first appearance in the Marvel Universe. But yeah, this is clearly Husky's got here, and shooting her in the face, blowing her skin off, all sorts of great detail all over the place. Nice little hatches all over the suit. The ugly suit he's wearing. Great looking hair. It's just a really nice looking cover. I think all the covers in this series end up looking very, very good. Okay, so we're going to start out with Illyana. She got talked about at the end of the last issue. Might as well start there. So she's working in some kind of mines here, and she's got some other girl with her. That's about it. These backgrounds look absolutely fantastic. This almost feels like P. Craig Russell a little bit with some of this line work. There's a lot of care put into the line work here. It's not, it's not all going to feel like P. Craig Russell by any means, but just little bits here and there as we get a big double page splash for what Illyana's home looks like. So this is some kind of energy core in Portland where they just kind of hollow out a mountain to fuel Apocalypse somehow, to provide him with energy. That's about as much information as we're going to get in this. It doesn't go into any kind of specifics. This spread is incredible, though. Putting all the detail in the foreground and then just making it kind of like a reverse silhouette up here, but really paying attention to the shadow. So it gets deeper and deeper as we go further up. Man, that looks good. Down here, it's just spatter to just kind of give you the impression of where the levels are. There's so much good stuff in this spread. Holy shit. Again, that paying attention to the line work, that feels like PCR. If it was P. Craig Russell, it would have been on everything, and this miniseries would have taken a year and a half to produce. But, we're going to get a little bit closer every once in a while. So Illyana and her friend are hiding because somebody is coming for them. Apparently the friend is new. Illyana's been here for a while. New friend doesn't know the rules. So rules are no fires till he's gone, no food, he might smell it on your breath. Nothing that'll draw attention to yourself. And the person they're talking about is the Sugar Man, who we're not going to see for most of the issue, I think. But we do get his outline at least. And he appears to be kind of a pig man, at least from the sounds he's making. But yeah, he keeps sniffing around, and it seems for a second like he might have locked onto them, but then he moves on, so he's decided to focus on somebody else. So they're, I mean, kind of safe for the moment, although they are still stuck in this place, which kind of blows. Very nice sequence. We did burn through 4 pages on this, which feels a little unnecessary. But then again, we did get that awesome double-page spread. So again, it's like, yeah, are you willing to sacrifice plot development for awesome art? Sometimes. Yeah, I guess I am. Okay, so then we're going to cut to a couple of just regular humans who work for Apocalypse and are just getting through, a busy day annihilating people. One guy's like, how'd you do today? The other guy's like, not too good. 30 dead per square foot. Other guy goes, you're slipping. And he's like, oh, what am I thinking? I forgot that family of 6. So yeah, these are mass killers in the employ of Apocalypse, which who knows how many of those he has. And yeah, they're done for the day, so they're going to try and get straight to the bar, and so they're going to take a cab, which I guess this is. It's a wild-looking machine anyway. Like a little bit steampunky, which would kind of end up being Chris Bachalo's style. I mean, he named a comic that. All sorts of cool little details in here, all the graffiti all over it. Great-looking stuff. They climb on board, and yeah, they ask him to just take him to the nearest bar. Only they don't realize somebody else is in the cart as well, and that turns out to be Chamber. He asks them for a cigarette. They ask him if he's got a light. He says, yep, as he lights up his psionic blast and just seems to incinerate everything inside the carriage. Yeah, we got Skin driving the thing. That is a very Joe Mad looking face. It feels like he's copying those directly. Like pretty close anyway. And through a long and rambly dialogue sequence, we eventually find out that the whole purpose of getting those 2 guys into the carriage was to get their uniforms so that they can sneak into the slave pits. Again, this stuff bugs me. Just the way they talk. Skin's like, you want to tone down the light show, hombre? Chamber's like, relax, the show's over. And he goes, easy for you to say. It's not your distended gray butt parked in the driver's seat, out in the public for anyone to see, is it? Just tell me, Chamber. Tell me you left enough of their uniforms for us to wear. Again, that could have been reduced to just kind of the last word balloon there. It would have been kind of brief for what turned out to be a pretty big panel. You could add on to it with interesting dialogue. You didn't really do that, though. It's just kind of the usual cliches. That's what I usually see out of Scott Lobdell. Again, great looking page. Nice to be able to draw the attention to the carriage here by kind of silhouetting it against the hill here and giving it a very thin outline to set it against the black background here. Some great looking stuff. Great looking stuff through this entire series. Here's some more great looking stuff. So this is it from the outside. This is, what is this? The Seattle core. Yeah, man, you had to get all the way down here before you found that out. Base of the High Lord Apocalypse's energy source for all America. That's kind of it. We're focusing on Colossus here, and his focus, of course, is just to get to his sister, who he thought was dead. Again, wild-looking splash. Whole lot of black being used here, but judiciously. Letting the colors take over for the sky here. I think that's okay because, nobody's looking at it. It's all just down to this monolith, which ends up looking fantastic. So Colossus and Shadowcat, they're scouting the place. They seem to be scouting the place out in advance of their operation at first, but then we're going to come back to them later like they never left this place. So maybe the operation is already underway. I'm not even for sure. But the plan is to send in Generation Next, the kids, to act as a diversion while Colossus and Shadowcat sneak in the back and grab Ilyana. Instead of the other way around, like you would kind of expect. But again, this is like a colder, more pragmatic Colossus who I guess figures that the kids are going to be loud and sloppy and that he and Shadowcat will get the job done properly. And if the Generation Next kids die, then, they weren't really fit to join the X-Men anyway. Kind of seems to be the deal. Colossus takes off. Shadowcat gets yanked by some dude named Undercloak, who seems to be waiting in the shadows here. As soon as she gets yanked, Colossus comes back for her. Looks like he was getting sucked behind the rock here. And then Colossus lifts up the rock. We get a great shot here of him getting right up in Undercloak's face. You can use that for marketing for sure. And then Shadowcat stabs him. And Colossus crushes him with the rock. So this 2 pages is completely inconsequential, other than to just get a short action scene in. It all looks very nice, which is great. It does feel like there's not really much of anything happening in this comic, though, which has been the case with, all of Age of Apocalypse that we've read so far. That said, all of Age of Apocalypse that we've read so far has been written by Scott Lobdell. Okay, from here we're going to cut to the spa downtown, and it's going to be a little while before we're told what exactly is going on. We get that guy from the cover, the Slash-looking dude, the big purple guy with the nose. He does get introduced as Quietus, although we're not told exactly what his role is just yet. He's just at the spa, and he's getting scrubbed down by a girl that we eventually find out is Husk. And he decides that he wants her to stick with him for the night. It is a fantastic looking page. I love the figures. I like the way he's separated against the black here by the small outline. This is something that's kind of business as usual for these two guys, Chris Bachalo and Mark Buckingham. It isn't made clear in the script who this guy is. You can guess this is Paige because she's got a southern accent. It kind of looks like the girl from the beginning, although we didn't see her with her mask off. And I don't know. I don't like how little we're focusing on trying to make things clear. You can get the gist of it, for sure, but it feels like Scott Lobdell just doesn't know how to present things in a clear manner. Claremont would do it with endless narration, where he would touch back on what he felt was every pertinent point of information that you would need going into that comic. It's sometimes made for a clunky reading experience, where, you're reading about things that are happening, and then he's got to say, this is this character, these are their powers. Here's a very brief history of their life. Okay, now back to this punch that they're throwing. It's not exactly the most fluid way to present that information. But for any kid who's picking it up who doesn't necessarily know what's going on in the comic, it is very helpful to get that information so they can get themselves situated. Here it's more like things are happening. Maybe you'll figure it out. Maybe you'll figure out who the people are. Who knows? They do mention here that this is the guy in charge of the Corps. And, Paige kind of rattles on for a minute before he goes, you know what? This isn't why you're here. You know that, right? You're here because my job is stressful and I need distractions every once in a while. As we get him pushing right up on her here. And he goes in for a smooch, which she kind of gags at. And he decides that's the test. He's got some kind of little 1940s radio looking thing, which apparently makes mutants violently sick, except for him. So that's how he detects rogue mutants. So obviously she's here up to no good, so he starts beating on her. Again, great fucking panel here. Super dynamic. And just kind of turning his outline into an oval here as he swings through. Again, getting that edge light all around him here, separating him from the background. It's great looking stuff. So this quickly accelerates into an interrogation where, he's trying to find out who she is, what she's doing here, all that kind of stuff. While he's in the middle of that, he notices a flask that, she was using that earlier. Not a lot of attention was called to it, but I guess a little bit was. And she asks him not to do anything with it because that belonged to her mother, to which he replies by picking it up and going, your mother smelt of elderberries, which is incorrect. Her mother was a hamster. Her father smelt of elderberries. Come on, man. Which also is in a movie that was released in 1976, which should theoretically be after Apocalypse has risen. I don't know that Monty Python exists in this universe, or shouldn't anyway. How's that for a nitpick? That's a pretty good one, I think. Anyway, he drinks from the flask, keeps roughing Paige up, trying to figure out where she's from, eventually susses out that she's an X-Man, and he's a little surprised that, the X-Men are interested in the Seattle Corps. He's like, this is one of the most heavily fortified of Apocalypse's operations. What are you even doing here? Gets ready to shoot her, like we saw on the cover, only then he starts feeling a little sick. It's like, oh, that must be because of what he drank from the flask. And we just get kind of bubbles for a second. And, apparently Vicente was hiding in the flask. Vicente's deal, I think I said before, was that he can change his body's composition from solid to liquid to gas. Again, that wasn't made clear before this. It's kind of vaguely made clear now where Paige says it was your idea to hide in the flask in your liquid state. It's like, okay, so we know he can change into a liquid state, I guess. We did see him kind of emitting smoke before. Again, we're not doing a very good job on just making it easy on the reader to know what's going on. But yeah, no, he got ingested by Quietus and then expanded and turned solid. So kind of burst out of him. So Quietus just got assassinated. Nice gross shot to underline it with Vicente just kind of covered in blood here. Oh, we get his lower jaw over here and we get his nose over here. We get a little eyeball. Yeah, he just flat out exploded. Yeah, that's nice and gross. That's good stuff. And then just, the brief back and forth while they restate that the whole point is to track down Ilyana. So, more ads. So what they're going to do is they're going to go in disguise as Quietus. Basically, Husk is going to reform herself so that she's about the size of Husk, but it does mean she has to be rather hollow. And she gets Vicente to travel around inside her, kind of inflating her. I don't mind that too much, and it means Chris Bachalo gets to keep drawing this guy. Meantime, Mondo, he's absorbing himself into the alley behind them. He's just going to kind of accompany them on the way, and he's going to knock out or potentially kill dudes who work for Apocalypse while he goes to meet them. And so what Quietus is going to do is he's going to go to work. Goes down to the core, mingles with all the guys who also work for Apocalypse. As the, normies kind of file in, a couple of them seem to recognize Quietus there. Turns out this is Skin and Chamber, who are also sneaking in their stolen garb that they've gotten off of the guys they killed on the way there. And then we end with inside where Ilyana's working, and some dude just sprays a whole bunch of spit at her. I guess that did something. Maybe if we recognize the spit guy. Okay, that's Generation Next number 2. I mean, we got a little bit closer to something happening there. Might as well move on to Generation Next number 3. I should point out that this is more than what happened in Astonishing X-Men number 1, I think. At least this team has a goal. They're taking their time working towards accomplishing it, to the point where I think you get to issue 3 here, and you're like, oh, this is the only thing that's going to happen in this comic. I don't know, it feels like this is meant to be like an Ocean 11 style caper, where, all sorts of things need to happen at the same time. It's a very intricate plot, but it kind of isn't. It's more, we spent 3 or 4 pages on Skin and Chamber getting their disguises. We spent another 5 or 6 on Page getting the Quietus disguise. And we spent 3 or 4 pages with Colossus and Shadowcat looking at the building. I don't know, it's the kind of thing where if you're not looking out for what the story is actually doing, it seems like things are happening, but I don't really think they are. Anyway, cover on this one, probably the weakest of the 4. It's still a pretty good one. Like, this is just kind of a classic superhero cover, really. Not as much rendering as we've gotten used to very quickly in the last couple of covers, but, I mean, still solid for sure. That's a bit closer, really. We're going to get a whole splash page on Skin and Chamber having gotten inside the Seattle core. That is kind of it. Again, it's a great looking page. Love all the shadows. Here we actually get a bit of a catch-up page, which I suppose is a good thing, where we just kind of reiterate the central concept, which is that Apocalypse has taken over and the X-Men are fighting against him. And we get a shot of what life is like living under Apocalypse, where you get these 2-headed, pierced-up mutants overseeing all sorts of human slaves. It's, again, a fantastic-looking spread. Great-looking shadows, great composition. Your eye just kind of goes through all the figures here before going up the central tower. Like, this part here, not really necessary, and I honestly don't think I even looked at it the first time through. You're not supposed to. This is just the suggestion of background, and it's accomplished correctly. You look at the stuff that Chris Bachalo wants you to look at. It's awesome-looking stuff. And then we're going to belabor the point that life under Apocalypse sucks. Like, you really just kind of said it all there with the double-page splash. But now we got to have this guy here. I don't know if he's based off of anybody, but he's a watchdog working for Apocalypse who's watching out to see if anybody's slacking. He sees a couple of humans who are talking. Turns out it's a father and a daughter, and he vaporizes the father. Gonna keep going with it. Daughter gets mad that he vaporized her father, and she throws a rock at him, and he gets mad, and he vaporizes the ground out from under her, which sends her flying down. So I guess life under Apocalypse sucks, right? This is page 7. Like, it's a damn good thing this book looks as good as it does, because there's an awful lot of time wasting going on in the story. Chamber sees this, he's about to yell out and, call attention to themselves, which would be really stupid. So Skin has to restrain him. He's the more pragmatic one, I suppose. And while that guy is kind of reveling in having blasted that girl and her father, Mondo has merged with the wall and kind of knocks the balcony that he's standing on loose. Guy almost pulls himself up. Mondo goes face to face with him and says, nope, not doing that, and boots him off the rest of the way. And nobody notices. So, I mean, okay, we are establishing that Mondo maybe is the only good guy in the book. He does have kind of that Groot thing, because he does talk in the third person a lot, so you get the impression that he's not, not the quickest guy. If he was a little smarter, maybe he'd talk in the first person. But then he's also got the Groot thing where he's the one who's most likely to be kind of compassionate. You get it in this future that sucks, which in my opinion we spent too many pages elaborating on. You have to be colder and you have to be more practical. People still like reading about superheroes who were, compassionate. Inside the head office, Paige and Vicente, oh, see, they switched it to Vincente, never mind, are reiterating that they're incognito as the guy who runs the place. Again, I suppose that's fine. I don't know that we needed a whole page for it. It's a cool looking page, though, where we get another close-up on this character, and I do love seeing Chris Bachalo's version of that character. So anyway, they're in this office because they're trying to find Ilyana. Looking through his home files, apparently didn't do it. So they figure maybe at his office. And the plan is to grab the girl, drop her with Magneto, and save the universe. And for a few moments here, her and Vincente kind of part. We see how she looks without being kind of inflated by the gas guy inside. And she really is just kind of all shriveled up. We get her with the pants around the ankles and everything because they can't stay up. And that's when somebody comes in to meet Quietus. And this is the Sugar Man who got introduced back in the last issue. No, we didn't see him in issue 2. Okay. And he's just a big walking face with all kinds of arms. Looks like he's going to eat Quietus' old lady's secretary, but then thinks better of it. Then goes looking for Quietus and finds him in the shower. And anyway, he's here to warn Quietus that Apocalypse has noticed somebody was examining his network psionically. That would have been in the first issue by Know-It-All. So he thinks maybe there's a break-in coming at the core. And we see what's going on here, because they didn't have enough time to get the body back together, so they had to jump in the shower quickly. She still had the head going, even if the body isn't right. So she's able to keep that, and, well, she's just sitting here on Vicente's shoulders, and he's got a gun pointed at Sugarman through the door. That's all right. That's a pretty good gag. Paige asks if Sugarman thinks Apocalypse is expecting people to try to break into the core, which Sugarman thinks is hilarious. Get them to laugh going, all them sharp little teeth going. And he says, of course not, but, we'll humor him, and we'll sniff around anyway. And with him gone, Paige is all pent up, and she has to smooch on Vicente because Chamber's not around. And she does it while she's still looking like Slash. All right. From here, we're going to switch to somewhere else in the facility. I guess this is some kind of outlet port in the core. We're not going to get any kind of, description. You'd expect to see, like, the core southeastern face, I don't know, sewage cistern, something like that. But, no description whatsoever. It's a cool looking shot of whatever it is. And Colossus and Shadowcat go floating in because Shadowcat's facing them. And we get the impression Shadowcat has suspicions that Colossus isn't worried so much about saving the universe as he is rescuing his sister, which are justified. Back inside the core, where they're doing their work, they're hollowing out the mountain. That's it. That's it for that page. Doesn't seem to be doing anything wrong. Ilyana's friend doesn't seem to be doing anything wrong. She's taking a little bit of time getting a rock over to the side of the cliff here. I guess that's enough where the guy who's on guard shoves her off the side here. But turns out Mondo has infiltrated and is able to catch her. So, again, Groot to the rescue. Meanwhile, in another part of the court, Chamber is blasting somebody for some reason. This really does just seem to be there was an Apocalypse guy too close, so he blasted him. Gets a tap on the shoulder. Oh, it's an ad. And, yeah, Quietus is right up in his face. But, of course, we all know this is Paige now. So I don't know if that's meant to be a moment of tension or something, but it seems like they're trying to coordinate. All of a sudden, they hear somebody behind them, so Paige knocks them out real quick. And then we're flipping again, as Know-It-All transmits inside the core here, which is dangerous, but, this is the mission they got. This is the one to take chances on. So anyway, the guys who snuck up behind Chamber and Skin and Paige, oh, and Vicente, I suppose, he's in there too, are the Sugar Man and his minions. And now Paige is in a little bit of a rough spot, because she's going to have to improv exactly what's going on. She has to say, I found some intruders, which seems like it was maybe unnecessary. Well, I guess because Chamber blasted that guy unnecessarily. I mean, I guess he's been kind of set up as a hothead. Still, it's just the only reason that things got escalated was because our character was dumb. And it doesn't look like anybody's chiding him for having lost control for a second. It's really just like, okay, come on. We're inside. We're going to do our operation. And then she just kind of blew their cover anyway. I don't know. This is not really trying too hard to make sense anymore. It's just, I've got an idea for a scene in mind and we're going to get there no matter what. Anyway, Sugarman wants Quietus to kill off the intruders. So he's like, okie dokie, pulls out a gun. And Sugarman's like, well, why don't you use your mutation? And Paige is like, why waste my power on these two? And the other reason is because she has no idea what his mutation even is. I like that. That's all right. Meanwhile, back with Mondo, he deposits that girl back on top of the ledge. She's like, can you take me with you? And he's like, no, actually, I'm not here for you. I'm here for the other one. I gotta take her. But I'll try to come back for you, swear to God. And he kind of grabs Ilyana and shoves her inside him, which is not entirely clear, but it is described enough going forward, so that's okay. And back to Colossus and Shadowcat as they get ready to enter to also try to find Ilyana. Except that Mondo has Ilyana. So what are they going to do? Are they going to do something? Maybe they're going to do something. I don't know. That's a cool shot of Colossus leaping. That's all we know. And one more cut back to Sugarman telling Quietus, okay, fine, whatever. You don't want to use a gun instead, use your gun. So holds up the gun to Chambers' head. And then we get bam. So maybe somebody got shot there. Could be. That's the end of an issue. So I think we've seen enough of the comic now that we can start evaluating the story. There are a few things I feel like I need to mention. For one thing, you might note that a lot of the commentary I'm giving here, it tends to be kind of straight narration. Just this happens, then this happens, then this happens. But a word you probably haven't heard me say a lot in this video so far has been because. As in, Generation Next has to go to this place and do this thing because they need to do this, or because this happens. And the reason I haven't said that is because the reasons for why they're doing what they're doing haven't been readily apparent. We started out strong by having at least a clear objective that isn't just go to a place and beat up a guy. That's definitely a good start. But right after the objective is established is when the problems start to happen, because that's when Generation Next splits up. And what is the reason Generation Next splits up? Because I still don't know. Chamber and Skin, they go off on their own to go get uniforms off of Apocalypse-type workers. That's fine. Why didn't everybody else do that? It seems like Apocalypse's workers are a bunch of goofs, and it should be pretty easy to track a bunch of them down and get themselves a whole bunch of uniforms. I'm not saying they should have done that, because that would have been boring if that's their whole plan. But what's the reason why they couldn't do that? Why did they have to split up? Why did Paige and Vicente have to go kill Quietus and try to masquerade as him? There's a bit of a reason given in that they're trying to look for information about Ilyana, but the thing is that we already know all the information we need really about Ilyana, which is that she's at the core. Now, if they had found further information, such as where in the core she's located, like if she's located in a specific section that's very dangerous to get to, or if she's been handpicked by Sugarman to be his personal servant, so that's going to be an extra problem. Or even just she has some kind of reputation for bucking against authority, so she's in some kind of punishment area. Or even finding out that she has a problem with authority, and that's all we find out about. At least we found out something. And that's where we kind of fall short, because they don't find anything. The whole reason to kill Quietus and masquerade as him is so that we can get to this confrontation here, where Sugarman finds them and, fake Quietus has to shoot Chamber in the head. It seems very much like this was a scene that somebody came up with, and they're like, yeah, no, that's a cool scene to put in the book. Somebody did a cursory, why are they pretending to be Quietus? And it's like, oh, they infiltrated his office to find out more about Ilyana. But that was as much as they came up with. We're not really doing a lot of A leads to B leads to C storytelling. There just isn't a whole lot of that at all in this book. It largely seems to be, these are scenes I want to put in this book, and we'll find ways to get to them. And those can sometimes lead to memorable scenes, for sure. The problem is that a lot of the time those scenes don't have the weight as if you'd approach them from the other end. They're doing it in the wrong order. Now, to this point, I think you could say I've been kind of hard on Scott Lobdell. I think that's fair. I also think it's a little bit warranted to be a little bit tough on Scott Lobdell, because ultimately it's up to the writer of a book to make sure that the information is presented clearly and to come up with interesting plot twists. Now, that being said, if you look at the credits in any of these issues, you're not going to find a credit for writer or penciler. Instead, you're going to see Lobdell and Bachalo creators every single time. So to me, that says this book was produced Marvel Method, as I imagine most books produced by Scott Lobdell probably were, if not all. And Marvel Method, of course, is the way most Marvel comics were produced. This started way back in the Silver Age, when Stan Lee was working with Jack Kirby. And the way it works is that the writer and the artist at first collaborate about how the story is going to progress, working out a rough plot line. Then the artist just goes off and draws the issue. So the artist becomes the primary storyteller for a large part of the production process. Now, the reason that particular process worked in the 60s was because Jack Kirby was at least as good a writer as Stan Lee. He was good at coming up with plot twists on his own, and his storytelling was excellent. And I think there have been plenty of times since when the Marvel method has worked. The problem is when you get a penciler who doesn't have the grasp of storytelling of somebody like Jack Kirby, which is going to be like most of them, really. They might have a tendency to get a bit more self-indulgent. They might have a tendency to mess with the pacing because they want to get a certain action in there. I mean, you look at the early days of Uncanny X-Men when Mark Silvestri was unfamiliar with working with Chris Claremont, and he threw in way too many panels because he felt like Chris Claremont was kind of drowning him in information, and he needed all sorts of little actions in there to marry the storytelling from panel to panel. It would take a little while for him to get used to it, and then he'd be able to start opening it up. I kind of get the impression that Chris Bachalo is maybe focusing a bit too much on coming up with big impressive images, which, to be clear, he is then pulling off beautifully. And as great as these big impressive images are, they don't necessarily tell a particularly involving story, I don't think. Or at least not one with any kind of pace to it. We're going into issue 4 of this miniseries here, and the first 3 issues have all been about the setup for the rescue attempt, and they weren't particularly complicated. So honestly, I feel like those first 3 issues could have been boiled down to one issue. Now, would we have gotten as many impressive spreads and, crazy splash pages? No, we wouldn't have. And we would have spent a lot less time on each of the characters. That said, I don't think the time we've been spending with the characters has really been of that much value. We haven't learned a whole lot about the characters in this universe. We also haven't set up all sorts of conflicts that needed to be resolved. It's kind of been a case of we're sitting with the characters because Chris Bachalo wants to produce large images of the characters. Anyway, that's enough of a digression. We should move on to issue 4 here before this video gets to be, rivals the length of one of my milestone videos. We don't need that on this one. So the cover on this one is kind of a glorious mess, really. We got Colossus versus all sorts of stuff. It's a little bit tough to make out what the stuff is at first. On closer look, it's all sorts of weird mutated faces. We got bodies in here. It is a lot of clutter. This is still a really good cover. I'd say it's better than the last one. It is a little bit unclear, maybe. Although I guess the most important thing is that you see Colossus, the big impressive shot. And then everything around it is just kind of Colossus is surrounded by enemies. That does come across, which is the most important thing. So here we're starting off with Illyana, and as we recall at the end of the last issue, she got just kind of shoved inside Mondo, who was in rock form, so he just kind of created a hollow inside of himself. And she's just kind of taking it easy, because this is like the first time Illyana has been safe in years. And it seems she's drifted off a little bit. She kind of woke up and got confused about where she was. So all she sees is rocks everywhere. She can hear the hammers at work in the mine around her. And she can kind of see a little bit of light peeking through some cracks here. So she kind of reaches through, busts her hand out. And then we cut to what we can presume is Mondo in disguise. So I guess his property absorbing power also means that he can duplicate appearances. Sure. Again, there is an awful lot of that in this comic. And we've got Illyana's hand poking out right here. Helpfully, we do get some thought balloons from Mondo saying Mondo's not happy, trying to sneak out with Illyana before she's digested. That is a concern. It was briefly mentioned at the end of the last issue when Know-It-All was speaking with Colossus and Kitty that the longer Mondo has Illyana inside of him, the more risk there is that he'll just digest her. Which is weird, but okay. I didn't see any stomach acid or anything in there. And he's trying to just kind of mosey out of the facility. And some other workers are starting to notice that he has a hand sticking out of his chest. So he kind of quickly pokes it back inside there. And then we're going to do a cut back to the Sugar Man with Husk posing as Quietus. Another big double page spread. And it looks as though Husk has had to shoot Chamber in the head. A little crazy, given that he's supposed to be her boyfriend. And she's like, well, there you go. You asked for him to be killed, and now he's killed. So I guess we can all get back to work, huh? Only Sugar Man isn't quite convinced. He's like, I'm thinking to myself, here you are, Sugar Man, responsible for the entire geothermal energy core for the whole blooming country, and you find yourself looking foolish in front of the underlings, and all I've got to show for it is one dead mutant. Which is like, okay, sure. It's a fun-looking spread. We're finally getting a huge shot of Sugar Man here, and Chris Bachalo is going to spend some time on it, just getting hatch marks in on every single fold. Gets a little bit of separation from his underlings and then pile in a little bit of detail in the background here, including 70s Marvel Frankenstein's monster by the looks of it. Only updated to have the flat top. All right. So yeah, Sugar Man's not buying it. He figures if somebody's going to go to the trouble of sneaking into the most highly protected facility in the country, theoretically, they'd probably have some kind of backup. And he's deduced that it must be Quietus. And one of the deals about Sugar Man is his tongue's been flicking all over the place the entire series so far, and now he uses it to stab Quietus through the chest here. And Quietus starts leaking as Vincente starts leaking out in his gaseous form. And it looks like being stabbed by Sugar Man's tongue did actually injure Vicente, even though he was a gas at the time. Husk as well is kind of injured, but all Husk has to do is pull off her skin and she's going to be good as new underneath again, which is what she does. Skin's there as well, looking after Vicente, and now, I mean, they're gonna do their thing, which is to draw the attention of the Sugar Man and his goons. So theoretically, Colossus and Kitty should be being very sneaky right about now. Except at that point, a big old explosion goes off. Really nice looking one here, too. Not even one that looked like it took too much effort to produce, really. Just kind of large, jagged shapes, and then break it up with some white media. That's smart. Ends up with a nice effect with it, too. But yeah, that is Colossus making his presence known, so kind of undermining any attempts at a distraction, really. He's just kind of put the kids in harm's way. Of course, what it really boils down to is that Colossus doesn't trust the kids to get his sister out safely. That's something he feels like he has to do himself, and it seems like when it comes down to it, that's a bigger priority than making sure the kids are safe. And at that point, Chamber pops up, so Chamber's fine. He just telepathically convinced everybody that he got shot. So it's like, okay, well, yeah, we didn't spend a whole lot of time on killing Chamber, so that kind of thing was bound to happen, I guess. Another one of Sugar Man's lackeys sneaks up on Chamber, but looks like Skin gets the drop on him, and he's able to turn his loose... Skin's whole deal is that he has a whole lot of loose skin, which kind of gives him somewhat shapeshifter-type abilities. It seems like the Generation Next version has honed it to more of a weapon, so he's able to essentially grow a unicorn horn and stab the dude through the head with it. It's like, okay, yeah, sure, why not? And then they see Sugar Man trying to make a break for it, and somehow they catch up. And Chamber is going to blow Sugar Man away. All sorts of what appears to be blood flying everywhere, just splatters all over the place. Pretty violent for Marvel, even for 1995. Looks like Husk got stuck looking after Vicente, and more of Sugar Man's goons are coming up behind them. But that appears to be around when Colossus arrives on the scene and just starts squishing people's heads. Tells Chamber and Skin to go to lower levels and find Ilyana. And, Colossus just seems to be getting kind of unreasonable now. He's getting a little bit obsessed, maybe. Which I suppose is understandable. So Chamber and Skin run off looking for Ilyana. Meanwhile, a tiny Sugar Man hears that they're looking for Ilyana and goes, okay, well, that's interesting, and starts burrowing through the earth by the looks of it. So it looks as though, I don't know exactly what it takes to kill Sugar Man. I don't think we're even going to find out in this issue. Also, very interesting page design. All sorts of panels going every which way. And your eye doesn't have any trouble following them. The word balloons help. You go this way, and then, we're back here. We're back here. Now we're down here. But the shape of the panels does direct you as well. That's very creative and very well done. Cool shot of Colossus here. On fire, shouting for them to find his sister. Great looking lighting in the metal arm here too. That's good stuff. And then we go from that to like a standard 9-panel grid, sure. Where apparently Mondo's disguise did not fool the guys he was walking past, and they did catch up and start pounding on him. Got him down against the cliff here. And yeah, just beating on his face. The little guy in the back, just yelling, hit him again. But that's when Mondo kind of absorbs himself into the cliff face, and the guy who was beating him was leaning on him for support, so he just topples over the side. Pops up behind the guy who was yelling to hit him and shoves him off too. And now we got to bring back Ilyana's friend, who, Mondo did see for a minute and promised that he would try to get her out. That's not really supposed to be his priority right now. His priority is supposed to be to keep Ilyana safe. But Mondo is the Groot of the story. He is the only one with a heart of gold. So he does try to get them both out. Chamber and Skin find him at that point, so there's a nice little reunion for a second. Skin's like, so where is the girl? She's kind of the priority. Mondo's like, yeah, no, she's safe. Points inside himself, and then all of a sudden doesn't look so good. Timeline for the Ultraverse. All right. More ads. Many, many ads. And then Mondo gets stabbed by Sugar Man's tongue for what I think is remembered by some people as, kind of a traumatic moment. Like, I would say that the character probably hasn't been built up enough for it to be a big deal that Mondo's been killed off here. But then again, he has been the only one who has been kind of nice to anybody. So yeah, Sugarman has made his return. He's back to full size, and he pulls Ilyana out of Mondo's corpse because Mondo's just flat out dead now. And that's when Colossus drops in out of absolutely nowhere. Awesome looking shot, super dramatic, great superhero pose. And he starts wailing on Sugarman until he gets splatters all over him. And Ilyana's like, hey, it's my brother. I knew he would save me one day. He's always come to my rescue. Again, we get some of those crazy panel designs here. And at the end of it, we get a big old splash page instead of story development. But I guess we got to kind of stick around and be dramatic, as Colossus has been successful in beating Sugarman to death, at least apparently. Pretty good shot of Colossus. Doesn't quite touch the shot from the page before of him in action. As far as a shot of Colossus standing still goes, that's absolutely fine, though. Looks like at this point, Husk and Vicente catch up. And Generation Next seems to have kind of won, really, because the general populace inside the core here are kind of running riot over their mutant overlords. That's a great-looking Chaos panel. Nothing's really getting lost in the details here. I'd say this actually pulls it off better than the cover does. There was a bit too much. It was a bit too busy on the cover. This, everything, again, is separated very well from light to dark and everything. With the differentiations between light and dark, whenever there's any kind of risk of some kind of confusion, we get a little bit of a white outline around the object in question. And the team's just kind of watching when they should probably be trying to make their exit. But they give some kind of mutant that we're never really going to see an opportunity to sneak up on Colossus here. And Kitty pops out of his back. Again, she was hiding inside him the whole time. So we are more than halfway through the last issue of this series. This is basically the first thing that Shadowcat has been able to do. She got off to a bit of a strong start with her introduction, where it's like, oh, this is a Shadowcat you haven't seen before. This one doesn't mind killing her charges, because it's all for the greater good. And you go, cool, so I guess we're going to see her be more ruthless and stuff. We're going to see her in action when she's not going to take any mercy on the enemy. We're going to see her acting like a drill sergeant with her students. But we haven't seen much of anything, really. It's more been like she's there when Colossus gets information, so Colossus has somebody to bounce the information off of. And then she's there to phase Colossus inside the building. And that's kind of been it. It's a bit of a shame. I would have liked to have seen more Shadowcat in this. But again, I think that comes down to pacing problems because we drew out so many scenes longer than we needed to, so we couldn't focus on everybody. So now they're going to make their escape, except no, because Chamber gets grabbed by hands. I think we can assume that's members of the mob on one side or the other, and he gets sucked into the pile here, and I think Skin goes charging after him. It's a little bit unclear just based on the drawing, and there's no description to kind of clarify things. Kitty says she's going to go after the boys. Colossus says, no, our priority is to get Ilyana to Magneto. So get us out of here now, and then we'll come back for the others. Kitty's like, you selfish, and then it gets cut off because Husk is yelling, don't leave us, Vicente, stop breathing. And that's when the cavalry comes in for Sugarman's forces. So earlier he called for some reinforcements, and it's those big monstrous-type mutants from issue 3 that are coming in, and they're just kind of sweeping the field, really. And we kind of slowly pan back from Husk and Vicente in the middle of the action here. So I think we can assume that Colossus and Shadowcat are phasing out of there. So this is the moment where Colossus has to make a choice between Generation Next and his sister. And the choice he makes is his sister, leaving the Generation Next kids to die. That's the reason for the poignant look on her face here. As she watches them go, she realizes they're being abandoned. Colossus was saying, we'll come right back for them. But then in the next breath, when they rematerialize on the other side of the wall, he's like, why did you stop? We need to get Ilyana back to Westchester. So he intended to just go, on foot, I suppose, from Portland to Westchester, and then maybe fly back if they're lucky and pick up what's left. It really was a case of, well, it's them or her, and I pick her, and so they can, they can take care of themselves. We taught them things. Which is a crazy character moment for Colossus, for sure. I don't know how earned it is, mostly because this didn't need to happen. When they get Ilyana, instead of running, they stand and watch the riot break out. Instead of having Shadowcat phase Illyana through the wall outside the core, while Colossus stays behind to defend the kids, Colossus says we all have to go. That one makes a bit of sense, I suppose, in that he doesn't trust anybody else to save Illyana, or he even just comes down to he has to save Illyana. That said, this feels like another instance of I've got a great idea for a scene where we slowly pull back from Husk here as she's abandoned by her teachers. And we didn't think enough about how to get to that part. It's good enough, I suppose, in that it is still a shocking character moment for Colossus. Again, this whole video is kind of about nitpicking, and I guess I just think that could have been executed better. Kitty's like, well, she's safe now. You can get her the rest of the way. I'm going back for the kids. And she just kind of refuses to go with Colossus any further. So he's like, okay, you know what? Never mind. You take Illyana to New York. I'll go back for the kids. Which seems like it's meant to be him being brave, but at the same time, it's really just, if he doesn't do this, then Shadowcat risks her life for no real reason, when he'll probably survive no matter what. Again, it's pragmatic. I think that works fine for the character. So he's not going to phase back in, because they would either have to bring Illyana with them or leave her out on the ledge here. So he's just going to drop down to the floor here and go charging back in through that pipeline we saw earlier. Is able to wedge open a door and take a look inside, and is just kind of chaos. We've got Husk here in the middle, being surrounded on all sides, she's got these gigantic mutants bearing down on her. She seems to have had her arm pulled off and is just like pouring energy at some of them. But this is a losing fight, and yeah, she gets surrounded. I assume this is the point where she dies, because otherwise, you would have to expect Colossus would bust in and try to save her. But he doesn't. He just kind of closes the door again and collapses. Again, assuming, I suppose, that the entire team at this point is dead. Which is a dramatic turn of events, for sure. But, okay, I'll talk about that in a minute. We're going to do a quick cut back to Kitty. Her and Illyana are making themselves a little fire here. And Peter comes up to the campsite. Kitty's like, where are the others? Peter's just like, I did everything I could. So yeah, Generation Next are all just dead. And we can see that Sugar Man apparently is still alive. So I guess he's maybe going to come back. We got at the bottom here, read the final fate of Peter's family in X-Men Omega. So yeah, maybe he'll come back in that one. I don't particularly know. We haven't read X-Men Omega yet. We will hit that one eventually. But yeah, that is it for Generation Next. That was a very rushed ending. Again, I think a lot of people have a lot of fond memories of that ending, or maybe not even necessarily fond, just like, holy shit, that was a moment. I think it could have been set up better, I'll put it that way. Because the thing about the pacing issues in this book is that we spend so long, like, just kind of dragging things out, just kind of filling space, getting a lot of incredible looking pages. Again, make no mistake, I'm not saying any of this was time wasted. If nothing else, we got some incredible pages throughout the entire miniseries. But the story of the miniseries did end up being a pretty simple operation that didn't have a whole lot of twists to it, and then had kind of a rushed ending. So when I say things like they're taking too long on this sequence, things like spending the first 19 pages of issue 1 on a training sequence introducing the team, that's all valuable plot real estate that you're chewing up. By spending all that time in those first 3 issues on just introducing the characters and executing the setup for the rescue operation. And then in issue 4, focusing more on big splashy images instead of plot development. By the time you get to, the kids have had to fend for themselves and they died trying, we don't have any time to devote to that. That should have been like the last 5-6 pages of the issue, I think. As the Generation Next kids are overrun one by one. We didn't see Chamber die. We didn't see Skin die. We're told Vicente was dying. He probably should have had a moment where he was on death's door, but he was still fighting. All we really got was the one big shot of Husk. And, it does sum it up at least. But it doesn't have nearly the impact it could have, because they should have been able to trick the reader into thinking the Gen Next kids were going to get out of this somehow. And by the time you get to the issue, there's just not even enough pages to pull that kind of thing off. So anyway, that's my pacing rant. Overall, I'd say the series is pretty good, which is still considerably better than what I thought of Astonishing X-Men. It has a lot to do. It has to try and get you invested in these kids that you don't really know at all. Any of the other books is full of characters that you don't really need to explain too much. Everybody knows, okay, this is the Age of Apocalypse version of Wolverine, only he's had some changes made. What are those changes? Oh, well, you can explain those in a couple of panels. Cool, those changes sound awesome. So what's he doing now? You've already made your mind up on whether or not you're invested in Wolverine. And in Generation Next, they do have to do extra work to try and get you invested in these characters. It's up to you whether or not they were successful or not. For me, it doesn't work, but I mean, I obviously very nitpicky about this kind of thing. And then they have an objective that isn't just go to a place, beat up a guy, and maybe smash a thing. So that's good stuff. You know, they're actually having to do a rescue mission that will theoretically help the overall story. And then you get a pretty good twist at the end, with Colossus selfishly protecting his sister instead of trying to protect his wards. You know, regular Marvel Universe Colossus probably tries to save those kids, deciding that, you know, yeah, his sister's important, but, you know, he's responsible for these kids. He has to make sure they make it out. And, you know, he would probably be convinced that they could get Illyana back anyway. This version doesn't have that kind of faith, and he sees his kids as more disposable. I think that's a good idea for an ending for the story. And I like that they went there. I'm a little surprised that they went there, to be honest. I think Marvel Editorial was kind of insisting that because this was an out-of-continuity story, that we should be killing some of these characters off for more drama, because we wouldn't have to worry about how it was going to affect the titles once we got back to the regular timeline. Wiping out the whole team is a bold move that I'm kind of surprised they went through with. That said, it does kind of make things a little bit easier for Scott Lobdell, because I'm pretty sure he's writing X-Men Omega, and it gives him a few less characters to keep track of at the ending there. So overall, I would say the story generally is somewhere between okay and pretty good. The art is incredible all the way through. Again, this is my favorite of Chris Bachalo's artwork that I've ever seen. And it kind of feels like the foundation on which his popularity is based. You know, I think everyone was behind Chris Bachalo's style at this time. Everybody was definitely reading Age of Apocalypse. And it seems like for a lot of people, Generation Next was their favorite of the miniseries. And not too long after this, Chris Bachalo moves to his more cartoony style with all the Borbly details, which, you know, again, I think splits his fan base. So, I mean, if this is the comic that made Chris Bachalo's name, which, you know, feels right to me, but I don't know how much truth there is to that, I think it's deserved. Like, it's like masterpiece seems like it's a big word to pin on this. It is absolutely excellent all the way through, though. So maybe it deserves it. Anyway, we're not quite done with Age of Apocalypse just yet. We do still have X-Men Omega to get to, and before we get to that, I do want to hit Weapon X. I'm curious to see what Larry Hama does with this series, because I know how intricate a Wolverine story by Larry Hama usually is. That said, I don't know how interested Larry Hama is in this particular crossover, and I get the impression when he isn't that interested, he just kind of leans into schlock, which I'm also here for. Like, I don't think we're really going to lose one way or the other with that series. And at that time, Adam Kubert is really starting to come into his own, too. So I think that should be a good one. I'm kind of looking forward to that. For this one anyway, though, that is going to do it. So thanks very much for watching, guys. If you got this far, don't forget to hit the like button, hit subscribe if you haven't already, and right about now you should be seeing a link to my Patreon. You can check that out too if you want. But yeah, that's going to do it. Thanks again for watching, guys. I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.